The marble-floored lobby of Hamilton and Co. gleamed with the kind of cold luxury that screamed legacy and ego. I'd walked these halls for years, always in heels, always invisible. My brother Nathan once said I was too soft for real business. He laughed when I told him I wanted to lead the company someday. My father had chuckled too, like I'd just said I wanted to go to the moon. But I didn't laugh, because I knew something they didn't. I was already building something of my own. Something much bigger. At every family dinner, I was seated near the end of the table, next to the cousins who were either in boarding school or still trying to figure life out. My mother would gently remind me to support Nathan's vision and not stir the pot. It wasn't stirring the pot when Nathan slashed my budget for the third quarter. It wasn't stirring the pot when he gave my idea for sustainable logistics to his friend and called it a company-wide innovation. I'd built that plan from scratch. You're lucky to even be in the room, Nathan once told me after a board meeting, where I had dared to question his strategy. Dad gave you a seat out of pity. Stay in your lane, Sarah. Sarah Richardson, the overlooked child, the family's afterthought. I stopped trying to win their approval the day they stole my pitch deck and sold it as their own. That night, I walked into my apartment, took a long breath, and opened the locked drawer in my desk. Inside was a folder labeled Project Ember, my company, my vision, my revenge. For the last 5 years, I'd been quietly pouring everything into Phoenix. Innovations, an energy tech startup built on clean infrastructure and AI-driven forecasting. We started small, 3 engineers in a dusty warehouse in Nevada, but our minds were sharp, and our mission was bold: change the future of global energy. I never told my family. They would have tried to sabotage it, the way they did every independent move I made. Phoenix Innovations was now preparing for a Series C round. Investors were circling like hawks, but at home, at the Richardson estate, my father still referred to me as Nathan's assistant. Last Thanksgiving, Nathan's voice boomed across the grand dining room. Q3 was stellar, he bragged, lifting his glass. Hamilton and Co. just secured a major government contract. We're unstoppable. Cheers erupted. I stayed quiet, sipping my wine. That contract? Phoenix Innovations had actually been the runner-up in that bid. We were this close, but it didn't matter. What I had in motion made that deal look like pocket change. Sarah, Aunt Margaret chimed. What are you doing these days? Still working on those little charity projects? Nathan smirked. Oh, she's busy, probably planning the next holiday party. I smiled politely. They didn't need to know that I'd just returned from Brussels, where I presented Phoenix's climate strategy to the EU Commission, or that our tech was being reviewed by NASA for potential use in Mars simulations. Little charity projects indeed. Actually, I said, setting my glass down, I've been investing time in a new project. Oh, my mother raised a brow. Just something with long-term impact. You'll hear about it soon. Nathan waved me off with a chuckle. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. You're not exactly Elon Musk. I laughed softly. No, but I prefer flying under the radar. That was the last family dinner I attended. The offices of Phoenix Innovations didn't look like much from the outside, a converted glass and steel warehouse on the outskirts of Palo Alto. But step inside and you'd find a command center humming with quiet brilliance. We weren't interested in flash, just progress. Max, our CTO, was standing at the wall-sized digital map, analyzing data flow from one of our new solar nodes in Morocco. If this stays stable for another 48 hours, we'll have proven full scalability in 3 continents. Good. I nodded. Keep an eye on Spain. Their grid isn't as forgiving. Unlike my brother, I didn't micromanage for power, I coordinated for precision. My phone buzzed. A message from our legal team. Hamilton and Co. is preparing for acquisition talks with Corgen Energy. My stomach turned, not out of worry, but opportunity. I'd been watching Corgen for a year. They were strong, but bloated. Hamilton would bleed itself dry trying to absorb them. It was the kind of ego-driven expansion Nathan would call a strategic conquest. In reality, it was the perfect opening for me. Looks like they're walking into a trap, I murmured. Want us to accelerate the launch? Max asked. I shook my head. No, let them sign the papers first. Then we move. Back at my apartment that night, I stared out at the city skyline, fingers wrapped around a mug of jasmine tea. I'd grown up thinking success meant being accepted, being invited to the boardroom, asked for input, validated. But real power? Real power was doing it on your own terms, while everyone else underestimated you. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Nadia, my childhood friend. And now Phoenix is head of global partnerships. She grinned. Guess who just called? Blackstone wants in. 50 million pending due diligence. My heart leapt. Get them on a call. I want the term sheet before Monday. Done. She paused. You're really doing it, Sarah? No, I said quietly. We are. 2 weeks later, news broke. Hamilton and Co. was acquiring Corgen for $980 million. Nathan's smug face was plastered across every financial headline. The media hailed him as a visionary leader. Dad called to say how proud he was. Mom sent me the article like it was homework I should aspire to. I smiled politely and replied, "That's great. Tell Nathan congratulations." What none of them knew was that Corgen's tech was 6 years behind ours. Their infrastructure needed billions in upgrades. Hamilton had just bought a sinking ship and I was holding the lifeboats. At Phoenix, we were preparing to unveil our biggest play yet, Project Horizon, a modular AI-driven energy grid that could cut municipal costs by 60% while reducing emissions by 80%. We already had interest from 3 international governments. The launch was set for the Clean Future Summit in Singapore. The keynote? Mine. 3 days before I boarded the plane, I got an unexpected call from Nathan. "Hey Sarah," he said, voice syrupy smooth. "Just wanted to check in. Haven't heard from you in a while." I raised an eyebrow. "I've been busy." Yeah. Listen, I heard a rumor. Some startup's been poking around our vendors, trying to poach our contracts. Oh, yeah. Phoenix something. Ring any bells? I let a long pause hang in the air. Then, nope, doesn't ring a bell. He chuckled. But it was tight. Well, keep an ear to the ground. Wouldn't want you caught in the middle of something messy. Don't worry, I said. I know exactly where I stand. We hung up. I stared at my screen for a moment, then turned to my assistant. Move the Singapore reveal to next week. I want every reporter from the Wall Street Journal to TechCrunch there. And book me a private room at the Ritz-Carlton. We're about to make headlines. Because if Nathan wanted war, I was ready. He just didn't know who he was fighting yet. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton in Singapore gleamed under soft amber lights, packed with global investors, media elites, and government dignitaries. The stage was set for Project Horizon's grand unveiling, but no one knew the full scope of what they were about to witness. I stood backstage, dressed in a simple black suit, sleek, understated, nothing flashy. Just enough to make them wonder who I was. My name wasn't listed on the summit agenda. The program said, Keynote, Phoenix Innovations, a Vision of Energy's Future. Speaker, TBA. The anonymity was deliberate. Let them assume. Let them underestimate. From behind the curtain, I spotted a familiar face among the crowd. My father, seated beside him. Nathan. My heart skipped. Dad was whispering something to a reporter I recognized from Forbes, likely bragging about his son's big acquisition. Nathan was beaming, nodding as cameras hovered nearby. Still oblivious. Ready? Nadia asked quietly, earpiece in hand. I exhaled slowly. Let's go. As the house lights dimmed, the MC stepped up. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for today's most anticipated keynote. Please welcome the CEO and founder of Phoenix Innovations. A ripple of confusion moved through the audience. Cameras swung to the stage, expecting a familiar face from the Silicon Valley circuit. A few glanced toward the side doors, waiting for some middle-aged male exec with a glossy resume. Instead, I walked into the spotlight. There was a moment, brief, electric, when silence hit like a wave. Then whispers. My father blinked. Nathan's jaw dropped. I stepped up to the mic. My name is Sarah Langford. I am the founder and CEO of Phoenix Innovations. And today, I'm going to show you why the future of energy doesn't belong to the past. I launched into the presentation clear, confident, and backed by 3 years of tireless work. I unveiled Project Horizon's AI-integrated smart nodes, our transcontinental microgrid blueprint, and the pilot results from trials across Morocco, Portugal, and Indonesia. Each slide landed like a calculated blow. Graphs, savings, real impact. People leaned forward. Investors began whispering into phones. One government rep from the Netherlands stood up to ask if we were accepting new city proposals. By the time I wrapped, the applause was thunderous. Several attendees rushed the stage. A BBC reporter was shouting questions. I nodded to Nadia, and we slipped into the media room, where our prearranged interviews began. But I noticed Nathan and Dad didn't follow. Of course not. They were still in shock. Later that night, I returned to my suite, heels in hand, adrenaline buzzing. A bottle of champagne sat on the coffee table, sent by the Singaporean energy minister. A sticky note was attached. Let's talk Monday. Incredible vision. Arc, but the buzz wasn't from champagne. It was from power, real power. For years, I'd eaten the crumbs of my family's praise. Now, they couldn't look away, not even Nathan. My phone buzzed him again. I let it ring. Back in California the following week, Hamilton and Co. was in disarray. The Corgan deal had gone south fast. Their tech couldn't integrate with Hamilton's systems, and after Phoenix's reveal, Corgan's stock nosedived. Nathan's name began disappearing from headlines. Meanwhile, our phones were ringing off the hook. Our Series D closed in 48 hours. Global partners lined up, but the final strike hadn't landed yet. That came 1 week later at the Hamilton and Co. quarterly investor dinner. I hadn't been invited, of course, but one of our new board members, a former Hamilton stakeholder, offered me a seat at his table. Come, he said with a sly grin. You'll want front row seats. The event was held at the Fairmont Grand chandeliers, tuxedos, crisp white linens, my family's kind of crowd. I wore navy blue and walked in just before the first toast. My father spotted me mid-sip. Nathan did a double take. I nodded politely and joined my table. When the host announced that Phoenix Innovations had officially surpassed Corgan in international market share, there was a collective hush. All eyes turned toward me. That's when I stood. Ladies and gentlemen, I said calmly, raising my glass, on behalf of Phoenix Innovations, I'd like to thank Hamilton and Co. for clearing our path. You've made global adoption that much easier. Gasps. A stifled laugh. Someone coughed behind me. Nathan's face flushed red. My father looked like he'd been slapped. I sat down. For the first time in my life, they didn't have a single word to say. After the investor dinner, things moved fast. Overnight, clips of my speech went viral. The woman who dethroned Hamilton and Co. One headline read. Another called me the quiet queen of clean energy. But for me, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about the shift. For the first time, my father and Nathan weren't the ones controlling the narrative. I was. Nathan tried to save face. He appeared on a late-night business show, trying to spin Corgan's decline as a temporary market overreaction, but no one bought it. Analysts were already dissecting Phoenix's tech, calling it disruptive, inevitable, and 5 years ahead. Nathan wasn't even 5 minutes ahead. A few days later, he requested a meeting with me. Nadia looked up from her tablet. He's sent 3 emails and left a voicemail saying it's urgent. I shrugged. Tell him I'm booked for the next year. We both laughed, but there was an edge to it. It wasn't just personal. It was justice. Meanwhile, our expansion plan was accelerating. Phoenix's partnership with Nordigrid opened up access to nearly every smart city pilot in Scandinavia. South Korea's Ministry of Energy wanted to build a testbed for our tech across Bizen, and an anonymous offer came in to license our software rumored to be from one of the oil giants. I declined. We weren't here to license power. We were here to claim it. But then came the move no one expected except me. Hamilton and Co., for the first time in its 62-year history, announced an emergency leadership vote. It was a quiet line buried deep in a public filing. Most skipped past it. I didn't, because I knew exactly what it meant. Nathan was being pushed out. 2 days later, my father called, not texted, not emailed, called. I let it ring once before answering. Sarah, he began, his voice unsure, almost cautious. I thought, perhaps we could talk, face to face. I paused. About what? He cleared his throat. About everything. Your work, your company, your accomplishments. That word landed heavy. Accomplishments. Not hobby, not little side project, not fling. Real, recognized, respected. I said nothing for a beat. Okay, I replied. My office. Tomorrow, He was 5 minutes early. I greeted him in the glass conference room overlooking the bay, every inch of it screaming modern power. As he sat down, he looked around, clearly surprised. I didn't realize you'd built all this. I simply replied, you never asked. We sat in silence for a moment before he said, I underestimated you. I met his gaze. You did more than that. He looked away. I wanted you to follow the family legacy. I thought Hamilton and Co. was your inheritance. I smiled coldly. It wasn't. It was your limitation. He winced. Nathan, he wasn't ready. No, he wasn't. He nodded slowly. I see that now. There was a long pause. Then softly, we're restructuring. The board wants fresh leadership, a pivot, clean energy, modern tech. They want someone who's already proven they can do it. He didn't say it, but I heard it loud and clear. They wanted me. I leaned back in my chair. Why would I take over a sinking ship when I've already built an ocean liner? My father looked stunned. I'm not interested in reviving Hamilton, I said, but I will make an offer. He perked up slightly. I'll acquire Hamilton and Co. at market value. No bailout, no golden parachutes. And you and Nathan walk away, quietly, permanently. He blinked. You'd really buy us out? I smiled. That's how business works, isn't it? He was silent for a long time. Then finally, he nodded. We'll review the proposal. You'll accept it, I replied. Because you don't have a choice. He stood up, slower than usual. You've changed. No, I said quietly. You're just seeing me now. The acquisition took 3 weeks. Hamilton and Co. became a division under Phoenix Holdings, rebranded, restructured, and reborn under the very leadership they'd once ignored. Nathan sent one last email before the paperwork finalized. You really played the long game. I never saw it coming. I didn't reply. He didn't deserve the closure. Instead, I focused on the welcome memo we sent to all 3,000 Hamilton employees. Welcome to Phoenix Holdings. The future is not inherited. It's built. And you are now a part of building it. My story wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about transformation. And we were just getting started. 3 months after the acquisition, the new Hamilton and Co., now simply Hamilton Renewables, was unrecognizable. The oak-paneled boardrooms were gone, replaced by open innovation labs. The legacy executives had either retired or been quietly transitioned out, and the employees who once rolled their eyes at the thought of clean energy, they were now leading it. I stood at the top floor of the Phoenix Tower, where both Phoenix Energy and Hamilton Renewables now operated under one united brand, Phoenix Holdings. The name wasn't just symbolic, it was literal. We'd risen from the ashes of everything outdated, everything condescending, everything designed to box people like me out. From this height, the city stretched endlessly beneath the morning fog. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who presented ideas to a boardroom that barely looked up, the one who was told to smile more, interrupt less, the one whose ideas were impressive. For someone so young, I wasn't her anymore, but I honored her because she had endured long enough to build this. Across the room, my executive team gathered around the sleek black conference table. Nadia was at the helm of strategy now, leading a team of analysts who had once scoffed at her two-millennial mindset. Eric, our CTO, was managing global expansions, and new hires from my old days, those who believed in me when no one else did, now held VP titles. As I stepped into the room, they rose instinctively. I shook my head. No need for formalities. Let's get to work. We discussed expansion into South America, the EV infrastructure initiative with Germany, and the pilot fusion project that we were now leading alongside MIT. At the end of the meeting, Nadia handed me a folder. The Forbes interview. They want to put you on the cover. I glanced at it. Sarah Harrison, from the shadows to the Samiti, closed the folder and smiled. Not interested in being a symbol. But it's your story, she said. No, I corrected gently. It's our story. The next week we held a press event at our newest research facility. I wore a navy suit, simple, strong, and walked onto the stage to a crowd of media, employees, and partners. 3 years ago, I began. Someone told me I'd never be more than a consultant, that I wasn't cut out for leadership, that I didn't belong at the table. The crowd leaned in, so I built my own table. And now, you're all seated at it. Applause erupted. Behind me, the massive screen lit up with our new motto: rebuild, rethink, rise. I stepped down from the podium and mingled with guests. Investors shook my hand like I was royalty. Employees asked for photos. Young interns told me I'd changed the way they thought about power, not just electrical, but personal. But the moment that stuck with me came quietly. As the event wrapped up, a woman approached. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes, and silver hair tied in a low bun. You don't know me, she said, but I was once the only woman in an entire engineering division. I stayed quiet, worked hard, and retired forgotten. Watching you speak just now, I felt seen. That almost broke me. I reached out and held her hand. You weren't forgotten, I said. You were the foundation. She teared up, nodded, and walked away into the crowd. That night, I returned home not to some glittering penthouse, but to the same quiet townhouse I'd lived in for years. Clean lines, warm lights, a kitchen I actually cooked in. I made tea and sat at my desk. The lights of the city glowed outside the window. An email popped up internal. Subject line, New Talent Program Proposal Phoenix Founders. It was from a group of junior engineers proposing a mentorship initiative for underrepresented founders. They wanted my approval and maybe a quote for the launch. I smiled and began typing. I was told I wasn't qualified. I was told I wasn't ready. And I was told I wasn't enough. I hope you're told the same so that you learn early how wrong they are. Sarah Harrison, CEO, Phoenix Holdings. Hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was revolution, and I had only just begun.